So I began to press Caylee about, have you found anybody yet? And then when she finally said she found someone, as I told you on the phone, it was really odd. Rather than just saying, yeah, I've got that worked out. Oh, yeah, I found this lady, Zenaida Gonzalez, and she watches my friend Jeffrey Hopkins' son, Zachary. And Zachary and Caylee play together, and they love to be together, so this will work out great. I'm thinking, wow, that's a whole lot more information than I really needed. And by this point, I picked up that Casey likes to tell stories. We sort of all pick up that Casey had a little problem with exaggeration. So that was one thing that struck me. The other thing that struck me is this whole story that Cindy and Casey are best friends. I can tell you, and will testify to the fact that Casey sat at our table over those months when Jesse wasn't there to talk to me and repeatedly said, I don't want to turn out like my mother. I don't want to be around my mother. I want out of that house. She hated her father for the whole gambling thing, and she even tried to get Jesse to move into a house before they got married. That's how bad she wanted out, but the reason that didn't happen is because I told Jesse, if you do that, I won't perform the ceremony. I said, if you want me to perform your ceremony, you can't live together beforehand. Otherwise, she would have hooked him into doing that. So she wanted out of that house badly. She didn't like her mother, didn't like her father. Now, that may have changed in 2 years, but that was pretty adamant then. So my take on George that night was he must have told his wife that I was coming over and she put the kibosh on it, or something frightened him, because we went in a 7-hour period of time of going, I want to talk to you, I got stuff I want to tell you, to avoiding me. Then, when Attorney Walsh slandered Jesse on TV, I called George. I wanted to know, was he in on this? Left a message. I said, George, I'm a little ticked right now, please call me back. The phone rings, his caller ID comes up, and it's Cindy. George is a little too busy to talk to you. What's the problem? I said, I'll tell you what's the problem. I made a mistake. I was angry. I should have said, no, I want to talk to George. But I didn't do that. And I went off on Cindy. And we had an interesting conversation. I told him what the lawyer said. Well, I don't know anything about that. And I said, look, you know what, Cindy, all bets are off. Anybody ask me a direct question about your daughter, I'm going to give them a direct answer. I said, I'm not hiding anything. And that's when she began to proceed, well, your son's no angel either. I said, I think he's involved somehow. Those were her exact words. That afternoon, I had spoken to Corporal Williams, and we were trying to figure out how everybody was putting Jesse in the middle of it. And Corporal Williams said, well, I'll tell you where you need to look. He said, Cindy Anthony, dropping your son's name left and right. And he said to me, she's telling people he's involved somehow. So when Cindy repeated me word for word what Corporal Williams said, I said, you know what, Cindy? I was talking to somebody in the sheriff's office this afternoon, and they told me you would say that, word for word. And so I said, you know what, Cindy, here's what I don't understand. You're talking how special your daughter is? I said, she ripped Jesse off for $250. He paid a phone bill for her, and she gave Jesse a bad check. Her response was, well, she only did it once. Saying, well, I guess it's okay, it was only once. And then I said, but you know what, Cindy, here's even worse. You knew Jesse was not the father of that baby. And the reason I know that is because George told me so. When the DNA evidence came in, he admitted that you both knew the math didn't work. I said, so you were going to allow him to take the fall for a baby that wasn't his? I said, and even that, he was still going to marry your daughter and raise Caylee as his own. And her exact words were, well, nobody put a gun to his head. And I went, you know what, Cindy? This conversation's over. I said, you won't be hearing from me again. We're done. That told me right then and there a couple of things, in my opinion. Cindy's probably as delusional as Casey is. But it also told me that right and wrong was irrelevant. The ends justify the means. Which is why I think we are where we are now, with numerous people coming back to me and saying they're working hard to frame your son. Somebody from Fox News called and told me that. All the Padilla's people have called me up and said, you better get on the move here. They are actively trying to frame your son.
When was your last conversation with any of the Anthony family? Was it that one with Cindy?
No, actually I've been talking to Lee. Remember I mentioned to you that. I had offered Lee somebody to talk to. Now he'd been using Jesse as somebody to talk to because he was frustrated. So then he started talking to myself, and after a couple of conversations, I told Jesse, I said, Jesse, I got a bad feeling we're being played. He said, do you think that Lee's playing all ends from the middle? I said, from the last conversation I have, I'm starting to question why he's so friendly with us and why he's telling us what he's telling us. Because he was telling me, Lee would come right out and say, my parents are out of control. We make a plan what we're not going to do. We get outside. I mean, he was not being complimentary towards his parents. In the last couple of conversations, he said, guys, I'm completely out of the loop. I don't even know what's going on around here.
When was the last conversation you had with Lee?
I spoke to him 2 weeks ago, and the reason I remember that is somebody from Fox News called me up and said, there's a name, we don't know who he is. And I said, who's that? They said, somebody named Kyle. I said, never heard the name before. I said, everybody's hot on this Kyle. See what you can find out. I called up Lee, and I said, Lee, is there a Kyle involved in Casey's life? I said, because he's not in my notes. Well, yeah, there's 2 or 3 of them, and one's a close family friend. I said, well, can you give me a name? And he goes, well, let me see who they're talking about. And never called me back, but he did something really interesting. He blocked me out from Casey's MySpace profile. Up till that afternoon, I had access to all her comments, which I've been saving and adding to my notes, had access to all her friends. That afternoon, asking him about this Kyle, I'm suddenly blocked. I can't get back into her profile. That was the last time I spoke to Lee.
And that was the last time you spoke to anyone in the Anthony family?
Yes. Now, the last time I communicated with Lee was by text message. And it was just something I felt led to do. He had gone to do the Trent inductive vigil. And I just...
That was the night that Casey was coming home, wasn't it?
Right, I think so. And I sent him a text message and said, look, for what it's worth, I said, I'm proud of the way you've handled yourself. I said, and I think you're a good young man. Just keep doing what you're doing. His message back, and I still have it, was he said, you don't know how much that means to me. I don't think his father tells him stuff like that. And, I don't, again, my opinion, I think Lee's a good kid. I think he's in a lousy family.
What has Jesse told you about what's going on? What's his understanding about what's going on? I know that you've talked to your son. You and your son have a close relationship.
Right. We have almost every conversation he's had with Lee, he's come to share with me.
What does he think is happening?
In the case?
Well, as far as what does he perceive the family's doing? What's his take on this whole thing? What has he told you?
The take is, and we both are in agreement, that something changed. Well, first of all, we know Cindy's not all that. I'm sorry, forgive me for saying that. The story's never stayed the same, but the longer we go into this, the more they circle the wagons, and the more the story gets honed in. I held out hope in the beginning that Caylee was alive. I really believed that Casey had stashed her somewhere or somebody took her. And the reason for that is, and I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but I can tell you when it was because I still have my notes. On Friday, July 25th at 2:25 p.m., I was praying with somebody on the phone, and I had what's called an open vision. And here's what an open vision is in Christian faith. I could be sitting here looking at you, but I wouldn't be seeing you. I'd be seeing something else. And this is what I saw in the vision. I saw Caylee asleep on her right side. I saw sand and dirt shavings. I knew water was over here because I could smell it. And I saw a gray house here. And it looked like she was sleeping. She was just totally motionless on her right side. And then in the vision I saw what appeared to be a very large man. And in my notes I wrote, human or angel, I don't know, who reached down with his right hand, took her by his left, and walked away. So I wrote all that down. The person praying with me saw almost everything I saw. When I did a YouTube tribute to Caylee, and when I downloaded 2 pictures off of Casey's profile, one of Caylee sitting in the little sandbox, and one near the playhouse, I almost barfed on my computer because I realized what I was looking at. I was looking at what I saw in the vision. And what I wrote in my notes and I told Jesse is, if anything happened to Caylee, that's where it happened. Now, I don't know where the dogs hit on, but that's what I saw. But I was holding hope that maybe the guy walking her away was somebody that came and took her. Because from what I've heard from friends and also from Jesse, Casey had a habit of, when guys would come over to the house, mom and dad weren't home, she'd leave Caylee unattended to be with them. Now in Jesse's case, Caylee's a baby in a crib. Like I tell you, I still read him the riot act for that. I said, you don't do that. Older, that's big trouble. That's big trouble. As far as Casey as a mother, what I saw, she seemed to be a doting, loving mother. And I may have sent this to you in my first email. Caylee was the center of Casey's life.